Hello, welcome. Today I would like to go over my tips on how to start mapping in Trackmania. Just to let you know, this is not a tutorial for the controls of the map editor. I know it can be confusing starting out with the editor, but if you do have any issues or questions regarding the controls, I would recommend Googling them, or you can type it in on YouTube. There are lots of tutorials out there that do a much better job than I would ever do. 99.99% of the time, you'll find your answer. Instead, this video is for people who want to start mapping in Trackmania, but don't really know where to start. Because, let's be honest, mapping is intimidating to get into. You are building something for other people, and you would like for them to enjoy it. At least, I don't think anyone really wants to build horrible maps, or if they are building horrible maps, it's kind of ironic, where it's kind of a joke. But even then, if you really want to get into Trackmania, the odds are you don't want to build horrible maps that people will just hate. And I don't want to be discouraging, but I have to let you know, your first few maps are going to suck. There is nothing you can do about it. Unfortunately, you just have to build bad maps before you can build the good ones. And once you do get to the point where you are building good maps, it feels really good to have others compliment your work, say that they enjoy it. But unfortunately, getting started is the hard part. And today I'll be going over what I did to get started and a few ways on how I get out of mapping ruts. So the biggest tip that I have to start building maps is, in fact, to start building maps. I know, you're learning so much already, but I mean, that is the most important part. No one is going to just open up the editor and rip out a masterpiece of a track the first time. You gotta open up the editor and mess around to get familiar with some of the controls, how blocks fit together, all that good stuff. Because the focus right now isn't to build a cohesive map, it's to build up the fundamental skills that go into map building. And one of the most fundamental skills is you gotta learn what your tools do. And especially for your first few maps, I wouldn't really get concerned with custom blocks, all these plugins. Just figure out how the base editor works, because you're still figuring out the restrictions, what you can and can't do. And I know it's easy to look at everyone else's maps and feel just completely inadequate. I mean, it still happens to me. And I know it's cliche to say, but everyone was once the person who had no idea what they're doing. And if you're just getting started, it's your turn. So take a deep breath and open up that editor. Once you open it up, you'll notice that the stadium itself is kind of intimidating, actually. The completely open space is filled with nothing but possibility, and you are the sole person, unless it's a collab, to fill that space. And for your first few maps, my biggest tip is to build short tracks. I'm talking less than 30 seconds. And my reasoning for this is, if you build a full map with full scenery, you will oftentimes pour double-digit hours, some people even pour triple-digit hours into these maps. And expecting that level of commitment right away is just not realistic. It's easy to look at the lack of progress that you've made over the course of hours on those large projects and feel frustrated, whereas short tracks let you focus on finding out how the process works while still feeling like you're making progress towards finishing it. And also, with your first few maps, you're going to be learning so much. So short tracks let you start building your next map faster, transferring what you learned from the previous map into your next one. Is this right here, you are going to be learning so much right off the bat, probably won't even realize it. And another thing is, don't start over, at least finish the route. It's important not to get into a habit of just starting a map, placing 10 blocks, not liking it, and then starting over, placing 10 blocks, not liking it, starting like, no, you gotta at least finish the route. If you really don't like it and it's just not working and you hate working on it, save it and come back to it. But if you aren't liking a map, try to find out why you aren't liking it. Just take a look at it and really just try to understand what about it you are not enjoying. Because if you can figure that out, you can learn why that map didn't work. And then for your next one, you can hopefully make a map that works a little bit better. But what happens when you open up the editor and you're just not sure what to build? You want to build something, you want to get into mapping, but you open up the editor and nothing, no ideas. Well, part of the reason why I recommend building short maps means that if you want to build a full map, you're ready for that full project, you can take one of your short maps and expand upon it. You already have a starting point, and it's a lot easier to continue an idea than it is to start a new one. So that's another reason why I really like building short maps. I do this all the time. My latest one being my lakeside track of the day, my second track of the day. That one is an expanded Little 4. And the full-length track that I'm working on as I'm recording this is also an expanded track as well. But what happens when you are starting on a new idea? I will say the literal start of the track, like the first 5 seconds, that's the hardest to build. Just because the hard part is always getting started. If you're looking at that blank stadium, but you've worked with other creative mediums before, you will be familiar with this feeling. It's that feeling of just, how do I start this? Getting started is the hardest part. And I will say, just don't overthink it. You're driving the start for 5 seconds. It's not that big of a deal. And especially if it's your first few tracks, I'd recommend starting on either road or platform and then transferring to the surface that you want to build on. And some common examples of starts, if you really want an idea, is the 180, the downhill, the booster, and the drop. And these starts are all common for a reason, because they work. The 180 has the player doing something for the first few seconds of the track, which lets the car gear up in a kind of interesting way. That way they aren't just driving in a straight line, because that's a little boring. Whereas the downhill, booster, and drop all help the car build up speed faster, so you can get to the gear that you want for your track. And then once you get to that gear, once you get to that speed that you're looking for, then the track gets interesting. So moving on to the main body of the track, you should have an idea of a loose theme that you want to do. That way, as you're continuing the track, you can keep that theme in mind, and you have an idea or a concept that you keep coming back to if you're stuck. It helps with the flow of the map, both while driving and while building. And at least for me, a large part of building a track is picking a theme and exploring what I can do with it. And I'll put in various elements, transitions, all that good stuff to see what works and what doesn't. And if you're struggling with a theme to build, try to think of your favorite driving styles, because if you enjoy driving the track that you are building, you're going to feel a lot more confident about that track and your ability to implement and test your ideas. If you're still struggling, what I like to do is to think of interesting combinations of two different styles. For examples for this, the first two that come in my mind are both from my little campaign. I have Rolling Hills, which is a short track that I built while thinking of what would happen if I tried to combine grass and sausage. And Cold Canyon is my other example, where I combined dirt and bobsled. And since I had those ideas, it was really easy to keep expanding the track until I got a complete track that I was really happy with. I like both these tracks. And I'm sure you've heard the phrase before, restriction breeds creativity. Within reason, of course. Don't go overboard with the rules. These types of restrictions really help narrow down on the options that you have, because a lot of the time, if you're feeling stuck, if you don't know what to do, it's because you're just overwhelmed. There's so many options. What on earth do you pick? And having these extra restrictions really help just quiet down those voices and being able to focus on what the rest of the route should be. And for me, once I'm done with a section of the track, I'll drive it a few times and I'll try to feel what should come next. It's difficult to explain. It might just be, I mean, it's a feeling. You can't really explain it. It's just you drive the track and try to have an idea of what you would want the next section to be. And then that'll help give you some ideas of what to follow up with. And once you've put in enough sections to fill out the runtime that you want for the track, time to end it. And just like the start, it's very easy to overthink the ending, because a lot of people want to put in a big flashy ending. I want to end on a high note. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I absolutely stink at endings, but don't do that. Once you get to the end time, just smack the finish block down, and that's it. If it's really awkward, you can adjust it a little bit, but just put an ending block down and work on smoothing that out. And if you really, really want a flashy ending, just put a jump up and do the finish ring. You can put a risky fin if you really want to, but especially for your first few maps, I would not recommend it. Just risky fins are overrated, honestly. And then once you've finished with that route, it's time to add scenery. And for your first few maps, I would not worry too much about this. Stick with very simple scenery. If you're prone to overworking ideas, you just keep adding more and more and you don't really know when to stop, you're like me. And so what I would do is I would set a time limit of maybe 30 minutes, and that's all you get for scenery, especially with short tracks. For a full, once you start working on full concepts, you can go for it. But for your first few short tracks, give yourself 30 minutes to add scenery. And once that's up, that's it. Stop touching it. It's fine. Scenery is one of those things that will definitely get its own video in the future. For a lot of people, myself included, it's the hardest part of building a map. I struggle with it so much. And if you're really stuck on what to do for scenery, honestly, just look at other maps, see what you like, and try to implement their ideas into your track. Don't flat out steal and copy, but try to be inspired by. Plagiarism is bad. I don't want to advocate for that. But just explore your options, and especially for your first few tracks, just experiment. I think no one's first maps were good. You have the perfect excuse to just go for it. If it doesn't work, oh well. You'll learn that for next time. And if you're feeling stuck after placing a little bit of scenery, it might be a good stopping point. That might be all the scenery the track needs. And in worst case scenario, you can always come back to it and add more later. But once you have the start, once you have the body, once you have the end, and once you have the scenery, that's it. Your map's done. Congratulations, you have built your first Trackmania map. If you're looking for a little bit of feedback on it, I'd recommend throwing it into the review server. Review server isn't the nicest place. You might get some flame, but try not to take it to heart. I mean, it's people online. People online can be mean. But I would mainly recommend, if you have friends who play the game, share the map with them, see what they think, and then take their thoughts and try building another short map, and then another one, and then another one. I will say I probably built at least 5 30-second tracks before I even attempted a full-length 45 to a minute long track. And for some people, that might be a lot of tracks. That might not be a lot of tracks. The important thing is to go at your pace. Don't put these grand expectations on yourself, because you're just kind of setting yourself up for failure at that point. And Trackmania is a game that looks really easy to play, but it's so hard to master. And it's the same with mapping. Once you look at a finished product, you don't really get the scope of what went into it until you start building maps. And the only way to get better is to keep building. If you burn yourself out on large projects, or with all this pressure you've put on yourself to be good right away, then you're gonna stop mapping. And once you stop mapping, well, you're never gonna get good at it. So to go over my biggest points, relax. You aren't going to be good right away, and that's exactly where you should be. Start off by building short maps. Don't overthink anything. Keep it simple. And most importantly, take this time to learn the basics. Once you're familiar with the editor, you can do what you can't do, then you can go out and look for custom items, these custom plugins. But for now, don't worry about that. Honestly, I think that just the entire golden rule is just keep it simple. Once you've learned the basics, then you can expand. And once you've built the first few maps and you're really looking for feedback to improve, then I would look at maybe some mapping discords. I know there are some streamers as well that we'll do viewer map reviews every once in a while. And the mapping Discord that I'm a part of that I like to use, DMA, is a really good resource. I'll leave a link to the Discord down in the description. But with that, I hope you guys learned some things, maybe realize that mapping isn't really that scary. It's just a process, and everyone's got to go through it. If you have any tips or questions, let me know in the comments down below. Mapping is my favorite thing to do in Trackmania, and so I plan on making a few videos, maybe more than a few, about how to get started mapping, beginning mapping tips and tricks, some intermediate level stuff as well, because that's where I think I am right now, at an intermediate level. I'm trying to learn how to be a great mapper, and if you want to come along for the journey, see what we can learn together, then go ahead and subscribe, like the video, share it with a few other people that are looking to get into mapping as well. I just really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch my video, and I'd like to wish all my fellow mappers out there good luck. Bye!